Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Davis, Executive Director for the Louisiana Trust for Historic Preservation, joined by Clay Amansky, our Louisiana Trust Development and Membership Director. And tonight we're proud to present the first of a six-part series this spring called Ask the Preservationist. And the kind of story behind this is to provide some general knowledge, a little more in-depth knowledge for those homeowners, for communities that have historic buildings they're working with, trying to save, and give them a little more information to be able to help maintain those buildings. Today, we're joined in the first part of our series by Ty McBride with Preservan and out of Oklahoma City, and I know I've probably just butchered that saying, the name and stuff too. So I'm going to hand the mic over to you and let you tell more
Yeah,
about yourself, if that's all right.
yeah. So my name is Ty McBride, and with Preservan?
Preserving,
Is it okay to go ahead and do a screen share?
absolutely. Let me
All right, let
let
me.
me get you set up here. We could do that. See if I can. Oh, here we go. Sorry.
So he does that. Yeah, like I said, I'm Ty McBride, Preservan, and what I'm going to talk about today, and some of the information I'm going to share with everybody on this and that watches in the future, is about how to find people to do your projects and how to get them the information they need to do the projects. And so it looks like I'm ready to go. So I'll hit that button, and there we go. All right. This is a presentation I like to do. It's called Mobilizing the Local Workforce. And before I jump into that, I can give you a little bit of background about myself. Like I said, Ty McBride, I grew up in the trades. My grandfather was a home builder. My dad's a roofer. And so I grew up doing this type of work, but not historic work, not old house work. Now, I grew up in an old house and watched my dad do everything wrong that everybody else does, right? Because that's what you do when you don't know. And I even put vinyl windows one time in my mom's farmhouse back when I was younger. So that just, I just like to be really transparent that we all get things wrong, and that's okay. But I grew up doing this work. I also grew up realizing, as I started to get in the project management side with my dad and my grandfather, that the people in the trades that were doing the work were getting older. As I got an opportunity to do my first historic restoration job in 2014, when I tried to get the labor that I was used to working with, that when I tried to get them over, it was pretty difficult. And it took a lot of me working with them, educating them on the opportunity and the processes to get them to do that. So at that point in time, I started a company. I left the family company of building and roofing houses, and I started a company called Old Home Rescue. And our primary focus was historic window restoration, wood window restoration. So all those wood double hung windows, we specialized in repairing those. And we did that all across Oklahoma, worked on some really amazing properties. And really, we've done it across the regions. We've worked a little bit in Texas and quite a bit in Kansas. And it's been a great opportunity to learn all different types. So it's grown. We've learned all different types of historic restoration, from roofing techniques to a lot of masonry restoration and repairs, wood, all types of wood restoration repairs. And one of the things we got really, really good at is rot repair. When you're working on old property here in Oklahoma, which I know from Louisiana, it's even worse because it's more humid and warmer. Rot's a fact of life. And so we got really good at repairing wood rot. And we do that with some epoxy resins. And we built a whole training program around that here at Old Home Rescue. And we thought, man, this is a really great idea. And as we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, labor is a major problem. And I started to hear from other homeowners that weren't just historic homeowners. They were all types of homeowners that said, wood rot's a problem in my house and I can't get it fixed. And so we started another company, and that's Preservan. Preservan is a wood rot repair company. I got a little picture of our car there. We do all of the repairs out of that little vehicle. And our focus was how to make preservation bigger than just historic. How do we take these principles and we take them to everybody? Because if you live in a house that's 15 or more years old and you've got any type of wood features on the exterior, you're going to face rot. And the cost of things is just unreasonable for most folks, right? Like it just, the cost of a wood window can be thousands of dollars, doors, thousands of dollars. And it can be really, really difficult to get a contractor. And so we wanted to solve that small problem. And we solved it through this company. It's such a great idea. And I've got some friends in the business that loved it so much that we franchised it. So we have an location here in Oklahoma City. We have a location in Tulsa, and we've got a location opening up this summer in Orlando, Florida, with Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog, who I'll talk about here in a few minutes. Great guy and got great information for you to get your old house fixed. So that's who I am. That's what I've done. But really, what I want to help you out with is your buildings and how to get folks in your area to do the repairs. So I'm not going to talk about DIY as much, but I will say that a lot of the things I'm going to say you can use for DIY. So it'll be very helpful in that aspect as well. But we're really going to focus on how to get other people to do it and where you can find those people and how you can get them to get the work done. So we're going to be talking about small and mid-size projects. So this is residential houses, of course. This is Main Street buildings. And we can go even a larger here to kind of a small institutional building for some small repairs on it. But this is where we always see the most opportunity because, you know, when people are spending millions and millions of dollars on big historic window restoration, there's tax credits, there's all kinds of, you know, there's money. And so you can find people when there's money. But when we're doing things on a smaller budget, whether it's a residence house or it's for, so of course, we have residence house. The other picture here is an event center that was bought by a local property owner, business owner. They wanted to convert an old post office into an event center. So it's a small business, but there's a limited budget. It's not tax credits, it's not millions of dollars. And this other one was a relatively small property developer that wanted to take a building and make it where they could use it and create an income from it for office space. And so this will really kind of touch on all of those things, but we are still talking about working on limited budgets. So typically, when I say that, I mean projects, you know, as small as a few $1,000s or even a few hundred, and as much as maybe no more than $100,000, but generally quite a bit less. And so one of the things I hear all the time is I can't find anyone to do the job. And it really doesn't matter where. I've met people all across the country, and this is the thing they always say. They post it on my Facebook post and my Instagram and my YouTube, and they say, that's really great, but nobody around here will do that. And I hope that through this, I can answer who around you can do it and how do you get them to do it. And maybe just I might encourage, if any of you are contractors, I hope to encourage you to do more historic preservation work and to get into it, because I think it'll be very beneficial to you. Now, what is the most common application when we talk about who's going to do the work or filling this gap? There's a couple of different common routes you'll find out there. One is through trade schools, and I think that's really, really important that we train the next generation in the trades, not just historic preservation trades, but all trades. It is a huge problem, and there are a lot of really great schools, but there's not enough. One of the most common schools that we hear about is the North Bennett Street School. So if you have a young person that you know that's really, really into the craft, you can send them there, and they're going to learn preservation from an almost an artisan standpoint. The image I have there behind that is Mount Vernon. They're going to learn to work on buildings like that, which would be really exciting. I'm jealous, but it's not very practical. You know, for us in Oklahoma, and I'm guessing it's similar to those of you in Louisiana, a lot of times those things that happen on the East Coast just never make it all the way to us. And so it's really great. It can be a really great resource, but at times it's not practical. And if you have a house right now that needs work, that's not going to solve your problem. If you have a property you need to get repaired, they're probably not going to be making it your way anytime soon. Another thing that's really great, and we pulled a lot of data from, and I'm going to share some of that here in a few minutes, is the Campaign for Historic Trades. Now, this is a really, really great organization that's looking at the big picture. They're looking at what the opportunity is in the historic trades as it compares wage-wise. And so if you're in construction and you're on the labor side of it, their information is really, really helpful. However, most of it is geared towards, once again, from the state of Maryland. So it's East Coast again, New England. And it's really geared towards those big $1 million+ projects because it's really looking at the opportunities for union labor. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from it. But a lot of times in our houses, we're probably not going to have any union labor come repair our portico or our turret or anything like that. And so it sometimes has limited application, but really, really great resources. Another thing that you can look at is the trade organizations. So there is the Preservation Trade Network. There's the Window Preservation Alliance. These are really great organizations that are promoting small businesses like mine that do preservation trades. And so I would highly encourage you to, when you're doing a project, to look and see at one of these organizations like PTN, like the WPA. Is there somebody in my area that currently does this work? That can be really great. Once again, what you're going to find typically is that these businesses are, one, they are way overbooked because there's not enough of them. So it's not uncommon for a preservation contractor to be months, if not years, booked out in advance. That's one of the reasons we kind of created the company that we created. Was Old Home Rescue generally has a 10-month lead time to get to a project, where our goal at Preservan was be able to get to projects in less than 5 days. By keeping it small, we were able to get to things a little faster. But preservation contractors are usually really booked out. So all really great options, all lots of good information and great things to look at, but usually aren't going to solve your need that you might have coming up in the next 12 months or less. So that's where I have built my career and my businesses on the local workforce, is trying to think creatively about how to get the local contractor to come alongside you and do the window restoration or the siding, the house painting, whatever project you have. How do you get the local labor to come along? Because a lot of times, and if you've ever done this, the local contractor, though well-meaning, needs a little help to get onto the preservation restoration side, because they are getting so much information from the major manufacturers that are encouraging them to replace. And so we took that on as a responsibility for our company of how are we going to educate the local contractor to know how much opportunity and value there is in that. So one thing I will say as we talk about this, if you are a homeowner, we are going to say that the local contractor do preservation work, we encourage them to increase their prices to make it more valuable for them, because they are kind of one of a kind. And so that's one of the things we talk about. But it's also a great opportunity if you're a contractor listening to this. I'm going to say, learn these skills and raise your prices to increase your, to improve your livelihood and your financial position. And this is what does it come down to when you're working with a local contractor? What really matters to them? They don't really care about the big window manufacturers, or the big companies that are selling the replacement. What they really care about is their family and their legacy. As a local contractor, before I got into preservation, I cared about providing for my family. It wasn't so much about making profit as it was about supporting the people that I love. The other thing that I really, really cared about was my legacy. I think for those of us that get into building, what matters almost as much as my family or as supporting them was about me being able to show my family what I got to work on. And even before I got into historic restoration, a lot of times Saturday with Dad looks around, like driving around in my work truck, and me pointing out all the great houses I built and all the cool roofs I did. And now it looks like me driving around and showing them all the buildings we got an opportunity to save and restore. And so those things resonate with contractors. Contractors love to show the pictures of their great work, and they love to support those they love. And so when you understand those two motivations, then all you've got to do is connect them to the value of preservation. And so here's where I'm going to speak to the contractors out there. What is the value of preservation? What can it look like for you? Now, here's some data. This is the only boring graph I've got, but I think it's going to help you see the big picture here. And this is from that report from the Campaign for Historic Trades. So the first is average wages compared. So the average wages compared of some trades, those that do non-preservation work and those that do historic preservation work. And across the board, you're looking at a 9% or greater increase in your hourly wage. And so this is if you're working on the job site and you're doing historic preservation work, you can look to be paid more. About 9% is kind of the average. And so for a carpenter, you're looking at the mid 20s to do the work on a typical job, and you can get in the high 20s, $28 an hour doing it on a preservation job. Masonry is one where we see actually getting on average above $30 an hour to do historic preservation work. Metal worker as well, getting above $30 an hour. So if you're a contractor and you're doing the work, this can be really helpful. It's going to help you make more money because you're going to have to learn a little bit. My grandfather told me that I was going to get my education either at school or on the job, and if to increase your value, it's going to take a little bit of education. Another thing that this means, though, if you're a contractor, is you're going to be able to hire better. So myself as a general contractor, it means I can hire better people. And we all know what happens when we have better people. We perform better work. We do a better job. We have more satisfied customers. We get better reviews. And so by understanding that I can pay more to do preservation work, I've been able to improve the quality of my business and the quality of the people that work with me. So it just makes life more enjoyable. And then the next graph I really like to show is the average percent of workers making over $50 an hour. And this is really exciting because I think at least for Oklahoma, and I'm sure for Louisiana, our living wage in Oklahoma is right under $17 an hour. I'm guessing it's somewhere close to that in Louisiana. And so $50 an hour is an incredible living for your typical worker, your typical person who hasn't gone to university or college. We've got right at 20% of carpenters making over $50 an hour in the preservation trades. Right over 10% of painters making over $50 an hour. Masons making over 20%, making over $50 an hour. And metal workers focused on historic preservation trades, over 30%, making more than $50 an hour. And so this is a huge opportunity. So this is just me speaking directly to contractors, homeowners. I hope you know I'm telling them like you can charge more, but when you hire well and you hire people that understand what they're doing, you're also going to get a better result on your house. And so I always tell homeowners, like, I don't really believe in the Goldilocks method, which is, find the high and get the low and pick the one in between. I believe in finding the most qualified person to work that you can to work on your property. And so I think there's a lot of value. I know I'm a contractor, so I'm speaking selfishly, but there's a lot of value in finding the absolute best. And when you get the best in the preservation, you get someone who really understands it, they will save you significantly amount of more money than the alternative of replacement. And so if you can find a contractor who can help you restore your wood windows or your wood door, you will save thousands of dollars compared to replacing that. And that adds a ton of value to you. Where if you go for the lower cost guy who's just covering things up, those things can actually end up costing you in the end. So you kind of pay twice. But what are the contractors, and what do you, if you're thinking about working on your old house, what do you need to be successful? What kind of tools does that local workforce need to be successful? The tools they need, first and foremost, are the right tools and materials. When we're doing historic preservation work, the materials and tools matter significantly. I was talking earlier before we got started about the workshops or the webinars that are coming up. And I think a lot of those are going to talk about those kind of tools in a lot more detail. But broad scope, let's talk about a few of the things. I've got an image there of a infrared heater. This is a really cool tool. This tool will remove glazing putty and paint without heating it up to the point that it vaporizes the lead and creates a lead risk. And also, it's safer and won't break your historic wavy glass. So it's a really cool tool. A lot of people don't know about it, but when you get into when you understand these things, there's a lot of really just neat things out there. So I'll kind of go through the images here of some really awesome stuff, and there's so much more. But there's another version of a paint stripper. It also uses infrared with a ceramic heating element. That's a tool that you can buy for, I think, less than $100, and it's safe, and it's not going to catch your house on fire, and it's not going to vaporize the lead. There's the glazing putty, and I know a lot of what I'm going to talk about is wood windows because that's where most of my experience comes from. But there's some glazing putty that is from a manufacturer out of Chicago, Illinois, family-owned business since the 40s. That type of glazing putty makes your wood windows last so long because it's an oil base, so it expands and contracts. Epoxies. I've got a picture of one of our Preservan epoxy technicians injecting. That's actually not a historic window. That's a 20-year-old Pella window. But same principle, he's injecting, consolidating that using epoxies. So there's some great technology out there with epoxies and resin that can be used to repair wood, metal, and stone and masonry work. So really great stuff. And then there's some amazing technology happening in wood science. There's a company out of the Netherlands that is building a factory, I believe in Tennessee in the next 2 years, that makes a wood called Accoya. And Accoya is a wood that is gone through the process of acetylation, which replaces a molecule so the wood no longer absorbs moisture. And so therefore, when there's no moisture in it, it is not it won't rot, and termites won't eat it. The manufacturer of it puts a 20-year guarantee of the wood underwater, and it puts a 50-year guarantee on the wood above ground. And here's another really great thing about it. It's not like it's real wood. It's just been changed at the molecular level. So it's not like a MDF or an OSB or some sort of like wood product. It's real wood, so you can treat it like real wood. We've built all kinds of things here at our company with this, from windows, doors, siding, all kinds of stuff we've built with it. Really amazing product, and I think it's going to become very, very accessible in the next 2 years. So I would encourage you to make a note of that and keep up with them as that wood becomes more available, because that's going to make a huge difference. You're doing redoing your porch flooring. It makes great flooring, any kind of exterior use, especially in the South. The next thing that I think is really important, if you or you're wanting to help a contractor be successful, whether working on your house, or maybe you're a city official and you want to get a contractor to help you out with some of your historic buildings, is get the right resources in their hand. There's lots and lots of books. I've got some images of my favorite here, Restoring Your Historic House. That's a really great one. Field Guide to American Houses really helps you understand what houses should look like when we're looking at those period homes to make sure what you're doing is appropriate. A book called Get Your House Right, another one of my favorites. And then one of my other favorites, the one that helped me get right and get started, was the Oklahoma City Historic Preservation Design and Sustainability Standards and Guidelines. If you live or you're a contractor and you work in a certified local government, it's very likely that your city has one of these. grabbing a copy of one of these books and diving into it to understand what is appropriate construction or appropriate restoration preservation versus what's inappropriate. That right there helped me build my business in historic preservation. I got a copy of that book. I read the rules on window restoration. Funny story: I was working as a roofing contractor, and we were working on a house that had been caught, a historic house caught on fire. And I went to get my building permit, and the city said, you can't get a building permit. You need a certificate of appropriateness. And I was just trying to get a building permit for the temp pole to get temporary electricity. And I said, okay, well, what's that? And they told me about it. And so I filled out the paperwork, and there were a few windows we were going to replace. I didn't know better at all. And so I just put, replace these burned windows. And so the city called me and they said, Ty, what do you plan on doing with these windows? They're historic. And I said, well, yeah, but they're a little bit burned and singed, and so we're going to replace them. And they said, Ty, I think the easiest way for you to understand this is imagine that Abraham Lincoln himself built that window with his own hands. Then what would you do? And I had no idea what to do, but I understood the principle. So I read the book and I dived into some of these additional resources that I'm going to share here. And this is what I would encourage anybody with a historic house. There is so much information out there. You could take notes of this. If there's additional ones you want to ask me about after I get done with the presentation, feel free. But where I started outside of that standards and guidelines from the city is I looked at the bibliography. And this is kind of has been my process of learning, is diving into bibliography. When you find one of these reports, you can kind of dive in deeper. And so then I found the preservation briefs. If you haven't been introduced to the preservation briefs, all you got to do is Google preservation briefs, and you'll find them. I think there's about 50. There might be more. The one I'm most common with is Preservation Brief 9, which is the treatment of historic wood windows. Preservation Brief 10, I think, and this is the one I put here in the picture, is probably the most applicable for most homeowners. This is so important. It's exterior paint problems on historic woodwork. If you have an old house, especially here in the South, a lot of them are wood-clad siding with wood porches and all of that. This preservation brief is going to give you so much valuable information. If you're a contractor, read it. If you're a homeowner, hire your contractor, print it and hand it to them. They're free to print off the internet, so there's no excuse not to. Get them in the hands of the people that are going to be doing the work. Once again, there's a bibliography to this thing. So dive into that. A lot of the things cited are free reports from the U.S. Department of Interior and Historic Preservation. So dive into it. There's so much valuable information. Usually they're only 4 or 5 pages or less, and so they're really easy to consume. And it'll start, if you're a homeowner, if you're a contractor, by looking at this and reading this, it's going to start a great conversation between you and the property owner, so you can have a good, or the contractor, you can have a good understanding of what expectations are. Because if you're doing a historic home renovation, specifically like window or masonry or painting, both the contractor and the property owner talking the same language is key to a great project. And so if you guys can understand together that we're going to try to execute this preservation brief, then you're going to have, I think, for the most part, a really, really good, successful project. But if you're a homeowner and you've been watching a bunch of YouTube and the contractor's not been watching that stuff, when you guys get together, those things aren't going to make sense to the contractor. The contractor is going to say, well, I just did it the way that Sherwin-Williams said. And though Sherwin-Williams can give some great advice, you've got to take that stuff and you've got to put it together with the preservation brief to make them go together. Another really great thing you can do is there's, of course, a lot of great free YouTube content out there about preservation in all types. Limeworks has some great stuff on their YouTube channel about masonry restoration. As I said, one of our franchise owners and friends, Scott Seidler, the Craftsman blog is one of the best places to really get any information about your historic house, from how to manage your HVAC to energy efficiency to all of the stuff. Scott's an old home owner, lover. He wrote the Living in the Past and Old Windows Made Easy. So he's a great resource. But he even has a class that's all online that you can take and learn all about window restoration, and that window restoration will apply to painting and door restoration as well. And what I would tell you, if you're a contractor, sign up for it. It's not very expensive. I think you get like a year's worth of access. I don't get anything. Nobody's paying me to say this. It's just so valuable and such great information from Scott. He's a true teacher, and he'll help you out. And if you're a homeowner, I would say watch it, but then I would say share my login with the contractor and say, once again, can we get on the same page as homeowner and contractor so we're talking the same language, doing the same thing? That way, through that webinar, you get a whole list of the materials that you need, the way that things should be done, kind of the things that you should do and the things that you shouldn't do. All of that's right there. I've got Limeworks, as I said, has some great valuable information for free on their YouTube. They also have some DVDs. I look forward to one day when they get it up on a digital platform like Trainual or one of those things. But right now they got DVDs. So if you still have a DVD player, or you can go find one, get the DVDs, watch the DVDs. There's a ton of stuff about masonry repairs and plaster repairs, all great information. And then Limeworks sells some of the best products out there on the market, and it's, you know, from their cleaning products to their type or their line-based mortars, which a lot of houses should use if they're historic. The other place I would say is to dive into some of the Facebook groups. You know, if you've been part of a Facebook group, you know they can be a bit challenging, but they can also be really helpful. If you're a contractor wanting to dive into doing some more window preservation work, Window Restoration Pros is a good one. You really can ask about anything. You're looking for a piece of hardware, you take a picture, you post that hardware on there, and the group will help you find it. You're wondering what the best paint is to use in New England, there's an answer. What's the best paint to use in California? There's an answer. What's the best paint to use in Louisiana? There's an answer. And so it's just really great. And it's not, there's groups like this for really all types of preservation trades, and there's tons of groups for old home owners. There's one called, I think it's Old House Fix, 40,000 members, professional contractors like myself and others on there answering questions for homeowners and contractors alike. So great stuff. I think Facebook groups are one of the key places that you can engage in this and learn about how to do this work and get your local contractor, or if you are a local contractor, to learn how. The last thing, and in this one, I'm really speaking to the cities and the state, but I'm also speaking to you homeowner and you contractor to encourage your local city and state, your state to put on workshops. I think this is one of, you know, it's really great, these webinars, but for you as a homeowner or contractors to get their hands dirty, really learning it really makes a huge difference. I mean, there's all different types of learning. And as a host of several workshops, I know how valuable these things can be. What we like to do when we host our workshops is do blended, and we like to do just homeowner ones, where we just teach homeowners. We go and we dive into things that are a little simpler. And so there's a picture there on the bottom left of a homeowner workshop we did, a DIY workshop we did in Tulsa. We really focus on keeping it small and keeping it accessible. So our goal is to get wins over the weekend, not to get divorced, right? When you're trying to do that DIY project at home. So we show you how to get wins over the weekend in window maintenance. We like to do contractor workshops. And there are contractor workshops that you can visit across the country. Limeworks has workshops. There's Bob Yap in Hannibal, Missouri has workshops, and we put on workshops here. Some of these are free, some of they have a charge, but they're all really great. And then I've got an image, you know, one of the big things, like I said, about us and Preservan was we host our own workshops for our Preservan franchisees and employees. And because it's constantly learning and constantly, learning with your hands. The last thing before I take questions is really to share what a win can look like, and I'm really speaking to the architects and the uh, people that work for their local city or the state historic preservation office. Is a lot of times I speak to a lot of the projects can get really big, and this is an example of a project that we got the opportunity to work on, and I just want to tell you kind of where it went wrong and how we were able to correct it using these principles. So this is Highland Cemetery. It was built by a WPA in Lawton, Oklahoma, which is where several famous Native Americans were moved to and lived out the remaining parts of their life. And it is where a few years ago, I think 5 years ago, a brand new trash truck driver didn't know that he wasn't supposed to drive his truck underneath that entry. And when he drove it underneath that entry, as you can see in that picture, he hit it with the top of his truck, knocked it off. It was about 10 inches. And the city of Lawton, a medium, small size city, got in touch with the State Historic Preservation Office, and the State Historic Preservation Office got him in touch with a historic preservation consultant. That historic preservation consultant got them in touch with a masonry contracting consulting firm. And before you knew it, this project had a spec, a bunch of rules stating that the bid needed to be about, I think, a little over $300,000 to repair. Lawton, being a small city, not an incredibly affluent city, didn't have the funds for this over-consulted project that they had developed. And there it sat for 5 years, just like that. Damaged, deteriorating because water was penetrating at that top where you can see that crack. Water was penetrating in there. It was freezing. It was continuing to damage the masonry. One thing about WPA, they're a really cool part of our history, but that doesn't, and they're worth saving, but it doesn't mean their construction was always the best. And so there were some limitations on the way it was constructed, so it was causing it to fail in an advanced way. We had done a window restoration project for the Carnegie Library for the city of Lawton, and they said, hey, I know this is kind of outside of your wheelhouse, but can you help us? And so we put together a restoration plan that was going to utilize local labor. It wasn't going to bring somebody in from 3 states away. We weren't going to over-consult it. We were just going to focus on rebuilding it in a responsible way, a way that was going to last forever. We used Limeworks and the education resources there. We got a mortar sample. We sent it to Limeworks to make sure we used the right type of mortar. It's hard to see probably from where you're at, but we labeled. We took pictures and we labeled every single one of the stones to make sure we put it back in the right place. We took the preservation brief for masonry, we translated it into Spanish. A lot of our labor in Oklahoma is Spanish speaking. I think that's the way for a lot of the South. And so we knew we needed to get it in their own language. So we took that preservation brief and we put it in Spanish. We put the materials and the material list in Spanish. So if you're working with a Spanish-speaking contractor or you're subcontracting to Spanish-speaking subcontractors, I'd highly, highly encourage you. Put your information in their language. There are apps now with ChatGPT and all of these cool things out there. You can copy and paste and say, translate into Spanish, and it will translate in Spanish. Now, is it perfect from a Spanish-speaking person's point of view? Oh, of course not. But they can read broken Spanish as well as I can read broken English. And so it's better than nothing, and it makes a huge difference. And it made a huge difference on this project. And so the ultimate win for a fraction of the cost. We were able to work with them using local labor, getting those resources in the local labor's hands to put the cemetery back like it belonged, and save the city money. And so that's the type of thing, whether it's a big project or a small project, you can do when you work with your local labor as a homeowner or a city to educate that local labor to work with them and to have kind of a game plan, if you will. That's it. That's it. I'd love to take questions, anything that anybody wants to ask.
Great, thank you, Ty. That was a great presentation. I think one of the main things is that preservation really is a language. It's not just a skill set, but I think that the more folks that understand that language, whether you're a homeowner that's talking with your contractor or you're serving on a preservation commission, um, and just need to have your guidelines updated, I think it's really an important barrier to break is that understanding that language and being able to communicate effectively and understand each other and kind of what your goals are. So that's really a great point. Are you seeing any how early are you seeing folks exposed to the education? I mean, at your workshops, do you have high school students there? Are they teaching it in high school? Is it more like community college level? I mean, where, at what point can you? I mean, I'm thinking of kids that may not have an interest in going to college, the traditional college route, which I don't think is that for everybody, or nor should be. We need more local tradespeople. And so, at
Yeah.
what point do we can we offer that as a career option?
Well, I think, we've seen that it's a career option at any point in life. One of the things I've loved about the work that we do is it's great for people just getting started or people starting over. Uh, we have very young people that come into it. I think that especially with young people, Gen Zers, they want to make their mark on the world. They want the world to be a better place, and they really kind of gravitate towards this. Unfortunately, I'm not in the education side, and it will take a lot of work, I think, to move that needle, because with those types of things, it's really about money and about development and all of those things. But from a business owner standpoint, I see huge opportunities. But one of the things that, and I wish I could be more encouraged by this. I'm encouraged by our own efforts, but I'm not so much encouraged by the efforts at the education level, because there's just not a whole lot of talk about it. So as contractors, we have to take the education on a lot of times ourselves and take the education seriously, because if we are waiting, regardless of historic preservation trades or not, if we are waiting for the education system to deliver us trained employees or employees even interested, I think we'll be waiting long past the point. And I'm young still. We'll be waiting past the point that I'm retired, and I think that's something that is really concerning to me. What I would tell you, the best thing you can do on that is talk to your legislators. Start locally. I know we all get focused on national politics, and that can be great for the news cycle. But really, where it comes down to is talking to your local representatives, that because they're really the ones that are handling education. Talk to them about the importance of this in the school system. I think as early introducing young people to it in high school would be ideal, because I think that it's such a huge opportunity. And young people can travel. They can go to the East Coast, and there's lots of programs. They can go there and then they can come back. But you got to get started early.
Great, great. I think another thing that you mentioned was one of your resources that you had early on as you kind of were starting off. Preservan was local building, the historic district guidelines, and making
Yeah.
sure that those are updated to even include materials that are applicable today. That we've learned a lot. Some of these guidelines, even historic National Register districts, have not been updated in 40, 50 years since they were put on
Yeah.
the books. And so I think taking a refresher course, and I mean the beautiful thing is that places like Oklahoma City, like Galveston, Texas, a lot of their design guidelines are online now, so you can pull those up, compare
Yes.
them to what you have in your own town, and make sure that you have the tools and understanding be able to provide the best protection, but also the greatest flexibility for your contractors and for getting a product that's going to last.
Yeah, I know, and I can only speak for Oklahoma, but I know that this is, if you're involved in your city government, or if you're a person that's voting and you're talking to your city council or what have you, is to encourage them to become a certified local government. I know that's a big thing that we've encouraged here in Oklahoma with different people. Like, you want to see a change in historic preservation in your community, especially those downtown buildings, is encourage them to become a certified local government. That gives them access to funds to write those guidelines and to host those workshops. Almost all the workshops we do are paid by the our state historic preservation office, which is then funded by through national. So that's how they get us to come. And so I think that's a really great place to encourage them to do that, and then they can also write those guidelines.
Absolutely. And that's actually how our funding for this series is through our State Division of Historic Preservation, and it's ultimately a
Yeah,
National Preservation Fund, Historic Preservation Fund grant that comes down to each of the states. And so it's really that's one way to definitely get started. That hands-on experience. You can look at videos or read things, but once you have your hands on, you really understand it better. I think. And so that's really important to get more of these types of workshops, hands-on workshops into communities to help build that. So something we'll be looking into.
absolutely.
Yeah, talk a little bit about, if you would, when you have a homeowner or a building owner and they have rot. I mean, coming in, what, how, I guess determining how much of the wood that's gone can be replaced by epoxy. At what point is it, replacing it in kind, and then I'll let you go with that for just a second.
Yeah, I think, of course, that's always it's definitely a challenge. And so I think what we're always balancing, either as a company or as a homeowner, is the historic value, the cost, and then and so who's going to do it. uh for us, what that looks like is that there are plenty of things that rot, that epoxy is not appropriate for, that because you can just maybe sister in another board and fix it up, or you can find something at your local lumber yard that will kind of it'll work, it'll be fine. But then there are things like historic windows and doors, and though there are some really great techniques out there for spliced in things like Dutchmans and all these like really, really great woodworking techniques, I'd encourage, if you have somebody in your area and you can wait for them to get there, those are beautiful, fantastic, and the best ways to repair using those types of high end. That's the kind of stuff I talked about. People learn at that North Bennett Street in Boston, and I know there's some companies like that in New Orleans, like NOLA window restoration. There's some companies like that. However, a lot of times we can't wait. We don't, and so really, what I look at is, if with the epoxy, if I'm going to save it, if I'm going to do no harm, then I think it's safe to use as much epoxy as makes sense financially. It's more expensive by the board foot than wood, of course, but when you're looking at a door that might have a replacement value of a few $1,000s, and it's a big hole, but it's a hole the size of my fist, well, it sure makes sense to spend maybe $50 on epoxy to repair it.
Yeah.
And so and then there's the structural element. Epoxy probably shouldn't be used for like structural things. If it's a rafter that's rotting out, I wouldn't use epoxy to repair that. Use it for more
Sure.
cosmetic type stuff.
And I think also, and you're also taking the opportunity while you're doing this to condition, especially on wood windows, condition the wood that's been dried out over time as well. So you're looking at,
Mm-hmm.
your linseed oil, your other things like that, to make sure that this is in good shape before you start building up the layers of protection
Yeah,
through paints and that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
all important things to consider when working on these projects. I guess just kind of closing up here. What about the argument about uh, the replacement windows being energy efficient? we worked on when I worked at the Galveston Historical Foundation. It's always a big argument for replacing windows, and so we actually took it was the Lead for Homes program for sustainability and energy efficiency. That was a program was pretty new back in 2010 when we did this. We just had Hurricane Ike come through, and there was about 1,000 square foot cottage that was knocked off its foundation. And we said we're going to compare the Secretary of Interior standards, which are our 10 rules of thumb in the preservation realm of
Hmm.
making sure that we do our best job, and we're going to compare the Lead for Homes guidelines for that. And so we did this rehabilitation of this 1,000 square foot cottage after we moved it to see how much we could reuse. And so it actually turned out to be the first residential rehab in the country to get a Lead for Homes Platinum rating. But we wouldn't have been able to do that without getting the some kind of a barrier airlock on the windows. And so we went to an interior insulating window. And so, have you had projects like
Hmm.
that that have worked? I mean, well with the interior insulating windows. I think offering that as an option to homeowners for getting that increased efficiency, lower noise transmission from the outside, things like that, of just
Yeah.
letting them know that that's a possibility.
Yeah, no, I always think about this. I always tell people think about it this way. So uh, when you're looking at a window, the window unit, the glass has an R value of less than one. So on a historic wood window, they're right. There's no R value, but you know what? There's less than one R value. But on a modern, the best of the best, most efficient double pane glass, you've just increased it to two. That's it. You've just increased the R value from less than one to less than two. And that's not really a significant improvement because when you have the glass that close together, you're really not creating that space for an air gap. And in truth, the real problem is not the R value, it's the air infiltration. Because if we wanted energy efficient homes, truly energy efficient homes, we would just brick all of our windows shut. But as long as we want to have light come into our homes, they're going to be inefficient. And there's not a number of pieces of glass that close together that's going to change that. What we really have to look at is air infiltration. Air infiltration is the problem. And old windows, yes, they have air infiltration, but so do new windows. Because when something has to slide up and down, it doesn't matter what your weather stripping technology is, there is still air that will be infiltrated. And so, really, what you have to do is stop that. And that goes to the point that you were just saying. There's been a study done in Pine Mountain over the last several years. They published a book. It's the Window Standards Collaborative. Every year they go to Pine Mountain. They've been doing this for several years, and they test all the different applications. And every single year they've tested that a wood window, a traditional wood window, with some basic old vintage weather stripping, and either an interior panel or an exterior panel meets and exceeds I think it's the 2019 or something like that, International Building Code for Air Infiltration. And that meeting and exceeding that building code meets and exceeds almost all codes that are enforced across the country because that's at the highest level. And so it's meeting and exceeding that for air infiltration. So whether it's an interior panels are great. I personally love exterior panels. And the reason I love exterior panels is because it gives you a layer of protection. They're non-permanent, they're installed with like 8 screws and a bead of caulking. But they give you that extra layer of protection against the deterioration of your glazing, wood, and paint. And so they can be a really great option.
That's great. Thanks for that information and stuff. I think that um, it's really understanding how to refute the salesman whenever it comes to it. I mean, there's a reason these are called replacement windows because you're in this vicious cycle. If you once you do it, then you have about 15 to 18 years. The argon gas leaks out. They get cloudy in between the
Yeah,
sandwich panes, and so you're in this cycle of constantly replacing those windows. So, and then also just the quality of the wood that these windows, most of the windows that we work with in preservation, or I mean the growth brings and the density and just
yeah,
the beauty of that craftsmanship as well is so much
yeah.
worth fighting for and sticking up for. So thank you for all of your insights tonight. Appreciate all your
Of
guidance,
course.
your leads on resources as well. We'll be following up with those and adding those to our website. Of course, the preservation briefs are the kind of the Bible that we go for. Send folks to when they're working on whether it's masonry to wood repair to other things like that. So thank you for your time and for your sharing your knowledge this evening, Ty.
Thanks for having me. It's been a great time.
Absolutely. Well, again, thanks to the Louisiana Division of Historic Preservation for the grant that's funding this Ask the Preservationist series this spring, and look forward to upcoming episodes. So stay tuned. Thank you. Have a good night. All right. I think we're